Hey, everybody, this is your good friend, Dr. David Proden from down here in the North Star recording studio, where it is a brisk 77 degrees tonight. You know, it's cooled down outside. We had that hot streak here in Wisconsin of 85 degrees and humid for quite a while, but yeah, fall is definitely in the air. That's the way it happens once we get to August. Talking about fall, winter is right around the corner. Winter crab boat season, Alaskan crab. You've probably seen the TV shows. Well, today we're going to talk about much more than what you've seen kind of scrubbed through and sanitized on the different TV versions of Alaskan crabbing, which are terrifying in their own regard. We're going to get firsthand account from Robert Cheney. He's going to tell us some fascinating stories that you're going to be like, oh my God, this is crazy stuff. So we'll tell you what, Rob's become a friend of the show, become a friend of mine. He was a pro snowboarder, and he had a case where he broke, I think, a fibula and a tibia, and then he sawed it off. Right, he sawed off the cast so he could get back on the crab boat for crab season. Started a company, a very successful company, pouring concrete. So in Canada, all these universities, all these places, articulate concrete. So just, someone that has taken and continued to kind of push the edge, right? But today we're going to focus a lot on these crabbing stories because when you're out on a crab stint, it's a long time. So the one stint was 122 days, and we know that once people get beyond like 90 days, they kind of crack, out in continuous chaos. So we're going to talk about that. But everybody, first of all, hey, thank you to Mickey Bus, to Joe, to Bacon, others in the chat room. I want you to know we're in for an absolutely great show tonight. Thank you to the 405 Media out of Los Angeles, California, for syndicating the show. Our good friends in LA. And hey, if you haven't bought this book, I'm going to move it over here, School of Airs. And guess what? It floats. We threw this in the Bering Sea. It did float for 9 hours. I'm not sure if you can actually grab onto it and survive, but the book does float. I'm just making that up. I don't know if it floats or not, but you should still get it. So it's good reading. Be great reading. Like if you're out on a crab boat and you have a little bit of time to yourself, pass it around. Our guest, Rob Travis Cheney. Rob, welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast. Oh my goodness, I think we lost him. This is not good. I think he froze. Well, anyway, that was a short show. Stick with me here. I'm going to bring him back. All right. Yeah, Rob, the boat got a little rocky, but don't worry. We'll bring him back here in just a moment of the Safety Doc Podcast. So there he is.
Yeah.
Look at this guy. He's back.
Sorry about that. Something happened.
Yeah, the boat tipped over.
That's right.
Fight his way out.
Starboard side.
He kept his hat. All right. No. So Rob, tell us about yourself.
I'm 39 years old. I'm a businessman now, and I'm a recovered addict, so I'm sober, proud to be sober. And
Congratulations, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've spent a lot of time my whole life doing hard jobs. I appreciate the hyping me up there, saying all those nice things about me, but the pro snowboarding was back in the day. So I haven't been a pro snowboarder since I was 25, but I did push those limits pretty hard. I went to high school in Whistler, BC, and so that's a pretty extreme spot, and managed to get a couple hundred days a year on the mountain. And then I ended up working at a snowboard camp every summertime as well, where we had a good posse of pro snowboarders that would come from all over the world. So I was blessed to pretty much snowboard year round for about 5 years. And along with that came some good injuries, and that's what led me to king crab fishing.
So I'm going to bring up an image right here that you sent snowboarding. What's happening in this photo?
That is a rainbow rail, and that's actually a front side board slide. And that was actually only taken a couple years ago. I still can snowboard to that level, but not the level that the pros do now with the big 100-foot jumps. So okay. Yeah, it's still and all my children. I've got 5 children, and 4 of them are avid snowboarders.
Wow.
2 little. So
So let's begin with that story of snowboarding. Tell us, yeah, how you got into that on a professional level. The amount of practice, the dangerous, side of that. I know you broke a tib and a fib, and um, let's get into that initial thirst to kind of push the limits and for adrenaline and these risky, you know, type of activities.
Well, on Vancouver Island, there's a little mountain called Mount Washington, and it's pretty much mid-island geographically, but it's with our low pressure systems, we're able to get 20 to 40 feet of snow a year. So weekends and spring break were spent snowboarding. And when I first started snowboarding, they had one snowboard in the rental shop, and
Okay.
there was maybe 10 of us on the mountain. So we watched the evolution of snowboarding, so to speak. And then when I was 15, the mountain sent my parents a letter saying I wasn't welcome there anymore.
No, Rob,
Yeah,
no, what happened?
too many, yeah. So we still have that letter. Too many clip passes, and just so I
Wow.
left my hometown and I went up to Whistler and started my snowboard career. Picked up Ride Snowboards as a sponsor and a few other ones, and that was the beginning of that. I did have a lot of injuries through that career. Lots of broken wrists and broke my sternum. Bit my tongue pretty bad one time. Wore a helmet, so it's pretty kind of the evolution was helmets was coming out, and we were cognitive that was wise. So my mom was pretty good at making sure we wore a helmet. So I dodged a head injury, thank God. Right,
Okay, yeah.
problem. But so that's where snowboarding kind of for me went, was to Whistler, big mountain riding right away. Then the Camp of Champions, the fourth summer, we had built a pretty big superhighway there, and I had overshot and landed the trick, but landed super hard and broke my tib fib. So I ended up with a leg cast end of June. And then I kind of told myself that was it for pro snowboarding for me, because I was.
So how old were you when you said this is enough for me with a pro snowboarding?
23.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So for those of you just joining us, live from Vancouver, we have Robert Travis Cheney is telling us about early snowboarding in his career, and we're going to get into Alaskan crab boating here in a little bit. So hey, hit that subscribe, hit the thumbs up if you haven't already, and let your friends and family know about this show. So one of the compelling reasons to talk about crab boating, and I'm going to have Rob back on the show. At that point, in a future show, we're going to be talking about a company that he has, Rooftop Life Raft. And Rooftop Life Raft is a company focused on surviving during floods with rooftop and different raft systems. We'll get into that in a little bit, but that's its own show. But so we know, right? We've talked about it many times on the show that there gets to be this finite voltage point in people. And it's about 90 days of chaos. And once you hit that, people typically start to crack, right? They have cognitive dissonance. They lose touch with reality. So I'm studying, and I'm like, oh my goodness, first of all, if you are a crab boater, right? If you're on a crab boat, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it is the number one most dangerous job. It is the most lethal job out there. And you did this back in 2007. I've done some research. There's been additional safety measures put in place since then, but like back in 2007 would be more technically dangerous than it would have be today. So how do you survive when you're out, for example, in 2007, 122 days, where you're on a boat, you don't have anywhere else that you can go. It's a very demanding job. You were sharing it with me, Rob. And tell us about this. When you sign the contract to go on the boat, the contract says there is a 100% chance that you'll be injured. So tell me about how you got into crab boating and that kind of that first, getting that contract, the risk you knew that you're going to take on.
Yeah, no, cool. In 2003, I had that leg cast, and I wanted to make a chunk of money. and I knew that I'd heard king crabbing was a spot. So I called the Baron off. I called them every day. And on September 8th, they said fly out to Dutch. So I flew right into Anchorage and then into Dutch Harbor, which is on the tip of the Aleutian Islands. And I got on the boat and met everybody there. And it was a dry boat supposedly, but guys had a bottle, so we took to drinking there that night. And I got told some stories. And I snuck off the boat in the morning at like 6 in the morning. And one of the deals is like you got to pay for your own. If you quit, you got to pay for your own accommodate or airfare home and all that. And so the first mate rolled up on me, and I was hoofing my way back to the airport. And he was like, "Yo, what's going on?" I'm like, "There's no way I'm doing that. There's no way I'm going." And he talked me into it. He was like, "Yo, we need you." So, and he gave all the other deckhands shit for scaring me. And then that was the beginning of that trip. It was.
So they're scaring you. So what are they telling you? Like, you're brand new to this, and what are the stories they're telling you that are freaking you out, where you're almost not going to do this?
Well, I mean, it's a very tenacious job. So when you get put with, there's 28 guys on the boat. There's a 6-man deck crew, and the Greenhorns get put with the head deckhand. So they're pretty rough on you right off the hop. And so they'll tell you stuff like, I mean, okay, during open season, there's 300 boats catching 18 million pounds. And it's go time. So there's a buzzer. You'll be head down working, and there's a buzzer. And each time that buzzer hits, you got to grab onto whatever you're near. And, you know, if you got a good skipper, he's making sure that you're not getting pitched too much. But sometimes, you know, something the size of a nice chunk the size of a refrigerator will come on board, and it's going across like a hockey puck, taking guys out. So there's a lot that can go on really quick. You know, there's working with the boat when you throw things, you know, against the roll, obviously. And the scupper holes are 9 feet long and about 16 inches. So when that boat rolls, a dump truck load of water will come on and quickly dissipate as that boat goes back up. So there's a lot of action. It's like really live hockey, you know, with lots going on all the time.
Sure.
You're guaranteed always. You got 2 knives on your waist. Lots of guys carry 1. I carried 2 just because it didn't take long. My second trip, I carried 2 knives all the time, just because in case you're tied up, you need to make sure you can do something quick. But yeah, it's the guys who got hurt were definitely bigger, and there's a lot of close calls every shift.
Wow. So tell me about this contract that you know that you had to sign.
Right. Sorry, you asked me that and I jumped subject.
Oh no, this is great. Yeah.
So what they do is they say, okay, you're going to sign a 90-day contract. Hypothetically, if you're going to get 0.05% of the share, they're going to give you 0.2%. And upon completion of the 90 days will be that other 0.55%, say at 0.75. So you really are locked into the morale being, you know, if you're at 60 days and morale's way down and they're setting back and you're not catching anything, you're locked in. If you go in on that second trip, say at 60 days, it's generally 30 or 35 days to fill up the boat, and you say, screw it, I quit, you're only getting that 0.2%. So they've got you coming and going, right? I mean, I came in at 80 something days. I think I only had 4 or 5 days left on my contract.
Okay. Yeah.
And, you know, was kind of itching to go home. You know, I had a baby. I didn't have a baby on that trip. I had a baby the next trip. But nonetheless, I was ready to go home. And they kept me. They said, no, you're under contract. And they kept me for 1 more trip. So as far as the boat goes, they're there to make money.
Wow.
You know, they don't care about your morale.
So you're telling me, tell me about the first, you know, maybe like week on the boat. What was new? What did you have to learn? What were some things where you're like, oh my God, I almost got taken out by this chunk of ice that came across? I mean, how crazy does it get?
They'll do stuff like Greenhorns, they call you. So you work, your shift will be 16 hours on, and then 8 off. And in that 8 off, you got to eat, do all your laundry, and clean yourself. And so that first 2 weeks, they're pretty hard on you. They want to break you. When I say they have a pretty good turnover of trying to keep guys or weed guys out. So that first couple weeks, like I got tricked into going and getting some hanging bait in a storm when everything was bat down and I didn't have a survival suit on. And so I got told to go into the header shack and start grabbing. And I got hit by a big wave and chucked into the set of stairs and came back in like whimping like a puppy. And the phone rings, and then we're way down at the bottom of the deck as opposed to being up in the wheelhouse. So that's why the phone would ring. And my boss got in shit they just played a trick on me, right? But they had no problem putting me out there in the elements to see if I could take it. So, so they play tricks on you.
So who did you trust then? I mean, who did you start to build or was it kind of like trust nobody? What was that like?
Well, we lucked out because I lucked out because the Baranoff Courageous Fisheries is a really good company. And the universe put me, even the first mate said when I first got out there, he's like, "What are you doing out here?" Canadian dude out and never had any experience on a fish boat. Managed to talk him on and grab it. So I did that by saying I was a hard worker, and they lean on you pretty hard for that. So he said to me when I got up there, like, "What are you doing out here, dude?" And I said, "Well, I just wanted an adventure." And well, at the time I was naive and said I wanted an adventure. I know, and so they were good to me, and they said, you're really lucky because you end up on the wrong boat out there with, say, people who perhaps don't have your best interest or aren't willing to take the time to teach you. I mean, I will say I saw one circumstance where a guy said he was a deckhand, and that's pretty big talk to come fly in and say you're a deckhand. You better know your nuts and know what you're doing, right? And then know all the cranes and stuff. And he ended up he couldn't tie knots, and probably he had glasses, and his glasses went missing the third day, and he walked around blind as a bat for 2 weeks. And finally the skipper like made somebody, basically point being the crew tortured him, right? So like if you talk the talk, you better walk the walk out there for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So what what were some of the craziest things that you saw or experienced? And I guess the more you got into it, once you got into it, like a month, 2 months, 3 months, how did things change?
Some crazy stuff that I saw was we weren't allowed to harvest blue king crab.
Okay.
They're big. They're a big species of king crab. They're bigger than reds. But there's always an observer on board, so you're catching bycatch, and you have to throw it all overboard or monitor it. But we were messing around with this blue king, and I poked it with a broomstick, and it snapped it like it was nothing.
Whoa!
And, yeah, like a snapping turtle would, right? Like spun the other half in the air. So like they're crabs are pretty neat. Like that was one thing that I saw that I thought. I learned a lot. I gotta admit, unlike guys that spend their careers doing it, my second trip when I went in 2007 was because my contracting company was a little bit, I had come into a rough time and I needed money right away. And so that's how the second trip came to be. But what else did I see? I saw a lot of injuries,
tell us about those.
Yeah, I saw, they had these crab cookers that, because we were catching processed boats, so we would do all that in house. And the deckhands, if they were really cold, they would come in sometimes, and they had several sets of gear on. And I happened to be roommating with the guy. I won't name his name, but he basically, our boat rolled a lot, more so than a lot of boats, just because the round hull. And I watched his eyes go as big as dinner plates, and he had 200-degree water had gone into his survival suit in through his gloves because warming his gloves up in the crab cooker.
Right.
And so he made me promise not to tell anybody because he didn't want to lose his job. His hands were just like sausages, like they were all burnt to hell. And he toughed it out, didn't tell anybody. They ended up finding out the second trip because he started getting infection. But, you know, that's how hardcore those positions are. And like how I got my job was I was the fastest processor because there's several processors. And well, I shouldn't say I was the fastest. That's not true. But I was working my butt off in there. And somebody got severely injured on deck. And the deck boss came in to this processor guy and said, my boss, and said, "Who's your hardest worker?" and pointed at me. And I went up to the wheelhouse and signed a new contract. Like that's how it is. So, and lots of close, like the close calls when I think back were all just instinct. Like one time we had a big incinerator on the back of the boat, and my friend and I, Darby, actually, yeah, I've been looking for him, but I'm not sure if he's around, but him and I were loading that incinerator, and he couldn't hold it, and it probably had a 180 pound door on a couple hinges, and that door came and almost got our heads. Like it's because the boat's being pitched and moved so much that you can't really anticipate if it decides to drop off, you know, 8 or 9 feet. All of a sudden, you'll be that high in the air off the deck, and to, you know, trying to catch whatever you're holding.
So how did I guess how do you acclimate to that? How does it get to be normal when you have that much turbulence happening on the boat? And I assume your body is wearing down every week you go on. It's just more fatigue. How do you keep it together? And did you see anyone who didn't? They're just like, "I'm done. Get me off of this." Or
we had a guy. I mean, they have those. There's only a couple sweaters they sell in Dutch at that famous store there, and one of them on the back it says, "The beatings will continue until morale improves."
Right, right.
You know, and I think that proves true. I mean, everybody's pretty excited if you're making money, but if you get an aggressive skipper that wants to set back, and you're doing all that work, hauling, and there's no money coming out of those traps, it can be really daunting to want to not. You know, lots of fist fights, you know,
okay.
Not uncommon to see a fist fight in the galley. You know, like definitely fought off a couple guys with knives, nothing crazy, like never got stabbed, but you know, tensions run high. It's, there's no females on the boat. So there's that factor. And then there's, I mean, it's a dry boat for the most part, even though there's probably guys sneaking some stuff, but it's not like there's a bar or anything. So, after 2 trips, 3 trips, things start to get pretty crazy for sure. What can I say? I mean, I pretty much got to where you put your head down and don't, you know, like I'll give you an example like this. You get in such a rhythm of grumpiness and fatigue that, you know, and you're looking for that big paycheck too. You know that big paycheck's coming. I mean, right. I think my paycheck was, $65,000 US. So that was a lot of money at the time.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, for a guy like me, my age, right? So.
Oh my God. So, I guess what injuries did you endure, you know, on the boat? And you know, are they still things to this day that you know, have to deal with, or any like weird psychological stuff, you know, like you saw somebody get swept off, or you had this like, you know, 3-day storm, and you're like, every time now, I mean, I guess what was the imprint on you?
Big waters. I mean, big water definitely is something that I hold near and dear to my heart now. Like the swells really are 60, 70 feet and 100 feet apart when you're out there in a storm. You're not crabbing in it, but when you see 80, 90 knot winds and you're, our wheelhouse was after the boat, which means at the very back. So we would be in the wheelhouse 30 feet up, 20 something feet up off deck, and, you know, big waves coming in the wheelhouse. So, definitely gives you a massive respect for big water. I don't think that. The other thing is hot water. We had a desalinization kit on the boat. So you might at best get a shower that was sporadic cold.
Okay.
So definitely, I still hug hot water when it comes out of the wall. It's something sounds silly, but I mean, it's like you take like that for granted after a long period of time. There's nothing like hot water after working hard, as some guys would relate to, and no hot water. I mean, they say it's hot water, but the boat rolls so much you'll get a little bit of warm for 5 seconds, and that's
right.
it. So, excuse me. Saw lots of big.
All right. So Rob is coming to us live here from Vancouver. We might have to get him back in here in just a moment. But yeah, this is absolutely fascinating stuff, right? Because how in the world do you survive 122 days on the crab boat? I didn't know that like people are going with fist fights and knife fights and things like that. I mean, that's absolutely nuts. So yeah, Rob will reboot. We'll bring him back in here in just a second. But just a recap. So this guy starts out as a pro snowboarder, right? After that, he breaks his tibia and his fibula. He has a cast put on. He takes an angle grinder and he cuts the cast off. All right, he cuts the cast off, and then so he can go on one of the crab boats, right? So he's not fully ill. He gets on this crab boat. He has 122 days out. It's just crazy. And here, all right, now the boat is still moving. I can see it right now. The boat is moving. So this is like if we were really on the boat. So hey, Rob, welcome back. We know we're working over some distance here. So Rob is in Vancouver. This is actually a good simulation for if we were to do this while you're on the crab boat going out. If we were actually doing it on the crab boat, it'd be all wild and it'd be like water coming and stuff like that. But yeah, so you were talking about I guess how did guys stay I guess physically energized? You said it was a dry boat. I mean, was that 100% a dry boat, or what were ways? I mean, how do you stay alert and awake for 16 hours with this type of heavy manual labor?
I mean, I find that's a long that could be a long answer, being a second generation hardworking guy. But I would say that it's pretty prevalent that a variety of things are used to keep you awake when you're out using, pushing those hours day after day. And it wasn't uncommon to see your Percocets and your Valiums and your cocaine. That being said, that's not to say that was specific to any one boat. I'm not going to go there, but
right.
It's going to say that, those types of jobs definitely come with those types of characters, and those guys, people can be really good at their jobs. They just end up sometimes, becoming reliant on things to get themselves through that next shift. And then and it's also, I think you see a lot of pain, physical pain that comes along with it too. I mean, I know you get what's called the claw out there, where your hands literally stop working. And when I say that, I mean like you wake up from whatever sleep you've had, and you got to pry them open.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, like they literally, because they're, you're using them, feverishly 16 hours a day. And when I see feverishly, I mean gripping, tossing and throwing and yanking and nonstop. So they end up just curling into themselves. So I know that's pretty common on the boat. They're here soaking them, lots of cuts. Your hands are, so, I mean, it all depends on your mindset, right? Like, we had a guy, so you steam out. We had a guy threaten to kill himself because he was freaked out, and we had to steam 12 hours back to Dutch, bring in another deckhand. He obviously didn't do that, but some guys, they lose their shit. Excuse me for swearing.
No, yeah.
They lose their stuff, right? They go mad. And see how that happened. I don't think I take more than 3 months at a time.
So you talk about guys losing it. So this is spot on with this whole thing of finite voltage, which in the military, if troops weren't rotated out, in 80, 90 days, there would be this effect where either they'd be killed, they'd be captured, or they have mental collapse. And then like Erwin Rommel, for the German troops, found a rotation pattern of a few weeks to rotate people soldiers in and off the front line. But tell me more about this phenomena that you saw of guys kind of losing it, right? And what happened? When would you be like, oh man, they're going to lose it, like in the next day or two? And then did you have to be more on edge because, like, are they going to start getting careless at their job? Was that like a sign? Are they going to try to, pick a fight with you? Or are they, because again, I mean, I was doing some research, and these crab cages, right? They're like 800 pounds and up that are swinging with the cranes, and the boat is swinging at the same time. So, I mean, yeah, it doesn't take long for someone to kind of like check out of their job, and suddenly your risk of being injured goes up substantially. So I guess, how did those people get monitored? And was it the captain, or was it someone else that said, you're gone, like you're done, you're too much of a risk to everybody else and yourself to have out here? How did that process go? Or was it other, was it you? Was it other guys like saying, hey, get your shit together here, because you goddamn near got us killed today?
That's a good question. With OH, and I had a couple that but mainly my construction experience is up in Canada. So OHS regulates us, and they're pretty stringent on the amount of hours that a worker can have. Well, maritime laws, that all goes out the window. So you can, during offload, for example, you'll do your 16-hour shift, and if you're the poor sucker that has his shift coming in at hour 14, coming into touch after filling up his boat, he's going to offload for another 25 hours, and you're going to do your 40 something hours, and there's nobody telling you. And if it's not like they're going to slave drive you, but you'll get shunned hugely if you don't have the tenacity and the endurance to pull that off. So it's kind of like a hockey team. Their mentality is we're all in it together, and
right.
I think that camaraderie does get built. But I snuck off on one offload and went and slept under some rope.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Like it's you can only take so much. I gained. I'm only right now 160 pounds, and you're gained 50. I was 200 pounds when I got off the boat. So you're eating a lot. You're working tons, and you're hoping every day, like. I only de-iced the boat 3 or 4 times, but I heard stories of guys de-icing like whole seasons so what that means is boats can get such a bad list, obviously, that if that accumulative salt water and then if a boat's listing and they don't de-ice, that's the beginning of the end for them. They'll go over and they won't come back with all the weight drops. So you can get woken up in your off shift, and if the skipper decides to do so, if you're going somewhere that's a little bit more Arctic, you're going to have to de-ice the boat, and that in itself is a whole. Like, if you finish your 16 hours of working, and I'm just trying to think of what your temperatures are, but minus 25, minus 30. So you guys, I guess it'd be minus 10, something like that for you guys, but. You're working in that weather, you're freezing cold, you go to, you have your shower, you eat a bit of food, and you go to sleep, and the boat's rolling. So depending on how you have your rack, whether you're parallel or perpendicular, there's not much sleep going on because you're getting chucked around in your rack. Right. You can get woken up to go for the rest of that sleep time to go pull ice off the boat the whole time, because it's, you're in a storm that you're 500 miles in the middle of nowhere, and coming to get you. So I'm back at the story because our boat, 18 million pounds during open season, really can take 10 to 14 days, depending on, this is back when I was crabbing. So if there's any crabbers crabbing right now, forgive me on the quotas. But so that could, for us, open season was 300 boats doing that. And that's when you see the real chaos and the action and guys going overboard and nobody stopping and things like that, because it's open season.
Right.
After that, our boat purchased what's called the community development quotas, and they purchased those off the natives of Alaska who don't have the means to fish those quotas.
Okay.
So we're able to crab for another whole month. It's not shotgun crabbing, but you're still crab fishing. Sorry if I'm yelling. So
It's good.
That being said, you end up with guys who, we crab a lot longer than all those those boats that got prepared for that open season. So our paychecks were bigger, but the risk of injury was higher because you're crabbing, like we did do peacod and gray cod as well as a fishery. So
Sure.
we take all that gear off and, did our fishery for king crab. But, the more you're at sea, the more at risk you are in the Bering Sea.
You're talking about de-icing. So what is that actually, what do you have to do to de-ice a boat? And I think you said if you don't de-ice it, it can get a list and then just tip over, and that's kind of the end of it, right? So tell us about that process.
Well, there's a couple variables with why it would list. So at the bottom of a boat, you've got you've got a hold, and in that hold, those deckhands or whoever's managing that inventory is going to be managing it strategically, so it's filling up evenly. And if that boat decides to go for too much of a roll because it's accumulated too much ice on its traps or on its bow or anywhere,
Gotcha.
all that weight that they've caught, their inventory now has rolled to one side of their hold. And so it's a factor that can happen quite quickly with if they're 1/4 full and they get into a storm and they're not de-icing, the next thing you know, that roll goes over too far, it doesn't come back, and they're going overboard and they're sunk, and the Coast Guard can't get them, right? The Bering Sea, that's why it's so dangerous. Like it'd be flat calm, and I'd just hauled up a bunch of bait, and my skipper would call me and he'd be like, oh, not again. Did I lose you?
Nope, I'm here. I just brought up a picture of you holding one of the crabs.
Sorry.
Give a little context here.
I was like, the connection in my home here is a little sporadic. So, it'd be because it's such a shallow sea surrounded by such big mountains. It'll hit a storm that the weather boys will tell you what's going on, but you'll have flat calm weather, and 2 hours later you'll have 50-foot swells. Wow. And that can be hard for a deck crew that's got their mindset on fishing, and then all of a sudden they're battening down the hatches for a storm, right?
So you have to like actually physically chip ice off of this thing, or and how do you? I mean, it sounds pretty harrowing. Like, how do you not? Did you see people fall off? If somebody falls off, how do you get them back on the boat? And
I physically never saw anybody fall off, but I was crabbing when a boat by us had a guy go overboard, and another boat hauled that man on board, and the Coast Guard came. They put him in the hold, and the Coast Guard came and got him. And that water's so cold and things move so swiftly that I just don't think that you could. Me personally, I don't think I'd make it if I went over the rail. It's just you're 300 feet away from the boat in 1 second.
Yeah.
That's what I saw. So, you're trying to look for that guy in the water while you're crabbing, because you can see lights in the distance, and you know that, hey, that guy's just gone overboard.
Okay.
And we need to be looking for him, but you're not going to find him.
So the image I have up, is that one of the boats you took?
That's that's taken from our boat. So that's taken from our boat toward.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, because that thing looks like it's half underwater.
Yeah. So that's the size of the cool thing about that sea is the waves will be really far apart. I mean, when I say waves, they're swells. And those swells will be, so it's kind of fascinating in that they're not tight, but they're the biggest, scariest waves I've ever seen in my life. And they're hard to explain how big they are without having been out there, and I'm sure guys that are listening, if anybody's been out there, they know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's absolutely terrifying. Terrifying to look at that. Wow. So
sorry to interrupt you. We had a he's probably, man, I hope I can meet him one day again, but we had an engineer named Gator who was just the most badass dude.
Okay.
And yeah, he was so intelligent and he swore a lot, but he was just all around, because I mean, an engineer of a crab boat's got to know what's going on in a variety of systems. There's more than I can even really fathom going on there. But he would go around just swearing at us, being like, "You guys have no idea. We're just a cork waiting to like." He's like, he would just be stressing all the time that because we were just athletic deckhands.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's like, "You dumb deck apes have no effing idea. Like we're gonna sink any moment all the time, right?" And we'd be like,
Wow.
we weren't, but he was thinking like that, right?
Yeah, tell me more about that because yeah, this is one of those things where yeah, you got somebody on there who's maybe looking at this from what the mechanical system standpoint. He's like every moment could be disaster.
Well,
That guy had to be like just shaking.
There's a sorry for the delay. There's ammonia, so ammonia is what keeps as this is probably everybody knows this, but ammonia runs rampant on those boats, which is highly flammable. Not to mention, just even breathing it in is toxic. And if God forbid there's an ammonia leak on a boat, we had one in dry dock on our boat in Seattle.
Okay.
And fire trucks came and whole 9 yards. If you had an ammonia leak out at sea, that's a whole other variable that you couldn't like. It clouds the whole. I mean, I guess I could relate it to something like tear gas. I've never been tear gas, but it dissipates a whole room in seconds, or you can't once you breathe it in, you're having a hard time breathing for a while. So those ammonia pipes, when you're down in the hold where you're putting all that crab or that inventory, those pipes are filled with, and lots of guys would go down there and smoke dope, right? Okay. Or they'd smoke cigarettes. And so because they'd be down there in the hold working for so long, they'd light up a smoke. Well, those are the things that really can get everybody. It's like those boats are only as good as they are maintained, and they're moving all the time and they're being bashed around. So the likelihood of failure mechanically is pretty strong. And then you throw in a guy having a cigarette, and then you got the variables are huge. And I think that's why you get saying it's a dangerous job all the time, because you can't predict it. All those.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So what's different than what they put on TV? The different Alaskan, crab boat television shows where, and then, I'm sure you're like, I actually did that job. Here's what's different than what they're showing you on TV. So what are some of the big things, the big differences between what's shown on TV about the job and what actually happens?
I'd say, what they've done. They drama. God I forgive me for any of those guys that are on the show, right? I've seen them on the plane. There's not that many crabbers. There's only 300 boats, so we all kind of cross paths, or at the time we did, what would I say that's different? I wouldn't say much. There's a lot of guys are a lot like females when you get them all together. There's a lot of drama. No disrespect to sure. So there's all sorts of drama that can happen, and the show is a pretty good representation of the dangers that are there, and the close calls are constant. I will say that. And now that I look back, they've called me, after 2007, they've called me 3 times, and I don't go.
Wow. So you say that the close calls too. How do you? Back in World War I, right? They used to call it shell shock. How do you recover from that constant, those close calls for 16 hours in a row, then the next day 16 hours in a row? Maybe you get called, hey, Rob, we need to, you got to come up here. We got to be de-icing right now. What were strategies you found internally to stay strong, or were there other rituals, people had to stay strong, or I'm just trying to understand, how you kept going. I know there's of course, there aren't a lot of options because you can't just exit the boat in the middle of, hundreds of miles around you and the payday at the end. But I guess I'm trying to figure out how did you really stay safe? Yeah, how did you stay?
3 of 5 of my deck bosses are dead. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And, so I think the life expectancy of a crabber is maybe 5 years if you did it full time. I don't think you'd make it. First, that's just my opinion, but I think you either climb up the ladder and you get into the first mate position and get into managing the boat and running the cranes, and then you climb, or you die.
Okay.
or you get seriously injured. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that was kind of cool was coming from snowboarding. We'd be out like, so on the snowboard chairlift, it's not uncommon to be in a storm and getting, you know, everybody's seen the Oakley goggles. But back then, you know, so we get on the crab boat and guys are like, they're buttoned down to where they can just see about this much out of their survival suit or their hoodie, whatever they're rocking. And I'm like, and they're like, oh, they can't even see and they're gaffing or whatever they're doing. I'm like, why aren't we wearing snowboard goggles?
Yeah.
And now they all rock, well, in the boat, like a lot of the guys rock snowboard goggles now for that. Like my boat, I introduced snowboard goggles on my boat.
Okay.
And I thought that was
cool.
A no-brainer because, you know, it's any snowboarder can tell you, or a skier for that matter, you know, you get your goggles fog up and you're riding down to go get them defogged at the chalet and, you know, it hurts. So try working in that. That's just ridiculous. And, you know, I had my wife send up some snowboard goggles and that was a quick fix to that. So, you know, Oakley makes a pair of goggles and a couple other ones. You can sweat as much as you want and they don't fog up. So, definitely some things that, you can do out there to make your life easier. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow. So when you decided that you had enough, okay. So after 2007, 122 day stint, what was the deciding factor? You know, I'm not gonna come back for another season.
After 2003, I was never ever going to king crab again.
Okay.
That was it. No, I was contracting and my wife, basically I ran into a financial position where a guy didn't pay me some money and I was a small contractor. And so I called the boat and they quickly found a position for me in 2007. And that was a bit of a different trip. We, unlike flying into Anchorage, we steamed up from Seattle up past all the way up, and it was a pretty cool trip, 10 days of, you know, scenery and all that. But then that was a hard trip because I was expecting a baby and 50 days in and like,
Gotcha.
you're thinking about like how the camaraderie was and all the last guys that you knew. And then all the boat dynamic and politics has changed and you got to start, they have no mercy on that. If you aren't loyal to them, you know, 6-9 months of the year, you start from the bottom. So even though I had that seniority when I left, by the second trip, I got it back, the second trip of the second contract, if you will.
Okay.
I had to pay my dues again. I had to go back out there. And even though I'd only done 112 days on that boat 4 years ago, I had to go and reintroduce myself and fight the fights and all that crap. So yeah, it's definitely not something I'd want anybody to go and do. And from what I hear, it's getting like the other thing about crabbing is like the quality, like where the Freightliners all go, the quality of crab that we'd catch there versus where we'd get it like in the tip of the Bering Sea is entirely different. So I think the quality of crabs, you know, obviously over harvesting. I mean, I'm not going to get into the politics and nor do I have enough education to talk about that, but I certainly saw a variety of quality in marine life.
Wow. And was it kind of your wife too saying, hey, we got a family now, I don't want you going back out there? Because what you're saying, you know, this life expectancy of, you know, maybe 5 years, if you're working on a boat and you're not like in a captain or crane position, I don't want you to do it. Was that part of it?
Yeah. I had my whole family basically saying like, we'll do. And I had a whole new, I mean, I grew up in a concrete finishing family. So, you know, I hated concrete when I went crabbing, right? I was like, but I came back with a whole new appreciation for concrete, which, you know, as anybody would, but, it's what, like, I mean, I started smoking cigarettes out there, right? Like there's a few things out there that are, like, there's no tax. So, you a carton of cigarettes, $15 payroll deduction. And if you're not catching fish, you're smoking cigarettes.
Okay, gotcha.
So like I picked up some nastier habits than I had when I started crabbing, and had to get rid of those. And yeah, I wouldn't do it again. And I mean, it's definitely the hardest. Like, what did I do? I broke a rib. That's the most that I did, but I consider myself pretty quick. And I did have an extreme amount, when I think about it, close calls. Like, wasn't uncommon to be dodging something all the time.
Yeah. And as you said, hundreds of pounds of things. Were there like actually blocks of ice that would just like fly across the boat? Like, from the
times. Yeah. Only when typically they don't want you on deck if they're breaking up ice, or they're somewhere where that's happening. But if they get into where there's a storm and they got to haul that gear out of there for whatever reason that skipper decides, and they push that team, you can get put in a situation where stuff's coming on deck, or just even large. How the boat is navigated, as you can either buck into it or be rolling, and those play a part too, and how you're fishing. So,
so you said something, Rob, earlier of there's a horn, and if you hear the horn, you got to grab onto something like immediately. What was that all about?
Yeah, so the skipper's communicating. He's communicating and watching over top of you, right? He's right up above you, and he's got a loudspeaker. He can talk to you, any one of you, and tell you what to do. And his job is to make sure that no waves come on deck that are big enough that are going to pick you guys up and take you over the rail.
Okay.
That rail actually becomes useless if there's water on board. You're buoyant, right? So if the combination of that boat rolls and there's water on deck, you just go right overboard. So he's got a buzzer that signals and tells you if he's in trouble. He's like, hey, we're about to take on a dump truck load of water or something, right? And quite often when that happens, the boat will take on a movement that's unpredictable as well. So it could drop, the floor could drop out from under you.
Right.
And being such a big piece of steel, it's going to be quick, right? So when that happens, quick. If you hear a buzzer on a crab boat, I'd recommend you grab onto whatever you're near.
Holy smokes. That's crazy. Because
otherwise you're just left at the mercy of the water that's coming on deck.
Yeah. Oh my God. Wow. Hey, so we have a question from Bacon Maldito. He's wondering about your thoughts on the movie The Perfect Storm. What'd you think of it? I mean, just in general, any thoughts? You're thinking about it.
That's a true story.
Yeah.
That's a true story. What it makes me think of is I didn't realize till after my first trip that those guys going out in the Bering Sea were on 100-foot boats, like 110 foot. So my answer to that is that size of that wave in the end of that movie, in combination size of that boat, I mean, it becomes insurmountable at some point, I think. And
because for clarity, I mean, for comparison, the boat you were on was 198 feet, and it used to be an icebreaker, and then it was reconfigured. So you're talking about 110-foot boat versus this 198-foot boat that you're on. But yeah, just so people will have that
wooden boat too. Like some of those boats will have a wooden hull, or they'll like, I've seen boats in Dutch that are wood going, and I just think to myself like, whoo, I wouldn't want to be in a wooden boat in the Bering Sea. Or let alone on a small boat, the no way, man. The boat that I was on was plenty big, and I was happy to be on it. And I give kudos to those guys that go out and catch our crab on a boat within 100 feet. That's and mind you, keep in mind they are going in and out the same shift. Or they're staying out for. I can't see how they'd stay out in those seas with that size boat.
So there's another question from Bacon. Did you ever like tie yourself to a railing? Like, were you always tethered to something so you didn't get swept off during some circumstances? Like almost a safety thing. Like if you're up on a construction site or roofing or whatever, they always have you tie off on something. Was that something they did in crab boating when you were out there, that they say, hey, Rob, tie off before you go out there? And DI
Yeah,
is
the ties
the
on the stack. So there's pot ties. Depends. There's two cranes on a crab boat. One is pulling pots off that pot stack that on those pictures I sent, and the other crane is picking that trap up and dragging it over to the automatic launcher, and then a guy jumps in, baits it, goes overboard. So whoever is tying and stacking those pots, or he's exactly right there. That's yeah, he's tied off. So if we're fishing out there and he's on top of that stack in a storm, he's tied off. Yeah, but
okay.
I have seen circumstances where he wasn't too, but I would say that that's not a practice that. I mean, if he's not tied off, it's because he's got to do something quick, and most of the time, they don't want to see their guys. Anybody who's on the stack or out on deck is a premier deckhand,
Right.
and they don't want those guys to be gone. And that's how fast they go. They're gone, and then you got to replace them. And then where are you? So
on this picture, where would they tie off? So here's a tire, and looks like here's you taking a nap down here, right?
They'll have all he'll have is a carabiner, like basically a rock climbing rope, and he'll have it tied to something like a grounding line, and he'll as he moves. And he won't always have it on him, right? Like if he decides to go from one stage down to the next, he might have to just almost very similar procedure to a guy who had to re-rig while rock climbing.
Okay.
Right. And there's no right or wrong way. And I personally have never been the guy on the stack.
And each of these weighs like 800 pounds, right? Each of these cages is okay. Holy smokes. Yeah, look how dented and just like mangled a lot of this stuff is, just from
they're getting dragged across deck and banged off the rails. And I mean, we spent a lot of time in dry dock pre-trip. I have to be humble and say that a guy that's only crabbed for 2 seasons, I'm sure there's crabbers listening to me right now that perhaps do it more so than myself, that would have a lot more input. And I gotta, give kudos to those guys that, hey, there's crabbers out here who that is their livelihood. And those
sure.
guys, so I just gonna hats off to those guys. But yeah, from what my experience with crabbers is they're tough as nails, and it's a really hard job.
Right. So we got this picture here. So that's you, right? You're just wiped out.
No, that's not me. That's my crewmate Rex.
Oh my God, it's Rex.
That's my crewmate Rex. Yeah. And so we would do little tiny runs sometimes. And that's how tired that's just we'd call those Saratogas. And that's a 20-minute Saratoga there.
Okay.
And I took a picture of him.
What is it? It's like a corrugated floor up here. Is that just so?
Yeah, he's inside the boat right now, so he's not out on deck.
Okay.
But yeah, that's Rex.
He looks tired.
Yeah, I hope one day I cross paths with some of these. Maybe this interview will get me cross paths with some of these deck guys, because a lot of them I've reached out and I can't find them.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah. That's crazy stuff. So, hey, you said, you came from a concrete family, and when you got done with crabbing, you went back into concrete, and you're very successful. I mean, tell us about why you got back in, and then also, I guess, what you learned from crabbing that you carried into, safety when it came to, pouring concrete. You had this, massive machinery. I think you had this big crew. You're working all over Canada. So tell us about that experience. So initially pro snowboarder, then you went into, crab boating, then into concrete. We're going to bring up a couple images as you're talking here, but tell us about that.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. Well, I'm a second generation concrete contractor. So by a young age, I was running my father's crews or working closely with his smaller crews, making sure they were run. And so that allowed me to quickly be an entrepreneur and start my own firm at a young age. And We were in 2008. Our economy, our little Canadian economy, had some issues. So we, like most Canadians do, we marched ourselves up to Fort McMurray. Fort McMurray is the heartbeat of Canada for financial, or for the economy in essence. Well, there's a couple other ones, marijuana, but that being said, so we went up there, and my father and I started pouring. After a decorative career of many years, we went up there and just started pouring flat work, which basically is just slab on grades or suspended slabs. And we, Fort McMurray rewards, it's a lot like, it's got the entrepreneurial mindset of America.
Okay.
It really does. It's, if you say you can do it and you show up and do it, they'll give you as much work as you want. So having a background and being able to work hard, I went up there and I was blessed to sweep the market pretty good. And in a matter of a couple of years, I bought a concrete pump, just an old one, and I bled over that and rebuilt it. And then I bought a new one. And the reason I bought a new one is because we were turning down so much pump work that, I mean, Fort McMurray is, I mean, it's 400,000 barrels a day pumping out of there. So
Wow.
There's a lot of revenue to be had. And being that it's a seasonal construction, you're go around the clock.
Okay.
So we would pump for 36 hours. We would pour 10,000 feet every day, sometimes 20 to 10,000 foot pours a day. We had 96 T4s a year. So a big, with only a 12-man crew. So lots of guys, turnovers, lots of, I call Fort McMurray Vegas without the fun.
Right.
So there's lots of drugs there and lots of bad things going on in terms of, lots of perhaps big money combined with some ignorance. So, that's Fort McMurray. So I guess, where am I going with that story? We built that company up pretty big.
Right.
And from there, we had a forest fire, and the forest fires put us back to Vancouver May 2nd. And those forest fires were, I think, being that you're a safety guy, you can imagine. I mean, if there was 100,000 people that had to get evacuated in a matter of 24 hours, so it was pretty big pandemonium for those forest fires. And that was the end of my Fort McMurray career.
And what year was that?
That was May 2nd, 2016.
Okay. Oh my God. So
Yeah.
I mean, so you lost your equipment and everything with that, and or you just lost business. There was no business up there because of the fire.
Well, so that fire was the biggest fire in Canadian history, and it was moving 100. It was moving. Was it moving? I think it was moving 40 meters per second at one point.
Holy smokes!
Oh, it was big. Yeah, it was big. I was pouring that day that we evacuated for Suncor, which is a big Canadian oil company. And so the forest fires came, and I had the contracts for 3 schools with the province of Alberta, 3 brand new schools.
Yeah.
And one of my pump was on one of the schools that caught on fire. So that pump didn't catch on fire, thank God. But it wasn't. We weren't allowed to. First of all, nobody was allowed to access the city for the first at least 35 to 40 days. They let us come back in phases.
Holy smokes!
So we weren't able to access. I didn't see my pump for like 65 days, and by then I didn't.
I have an image here, Rob. Is this the pump, or it was similar to this? You're talking about a pump. This is the one you sent me.
That's the pump. Yeah.
Okay. And how much? I guess so. This piece of equipment is what? $500,000 or more?
I paid $750,000 for it.
Holy smokes! So basically, you're like, you can't get to that for a month, and you have no idea what condition it's in.
Yeah, we tried to see it in the cameras through Bird Construction. I was working for Bird Construction at the time, and I couldn't see it. And then I finally had someone lay eyes on it, but from far away, they wouldn't let us touch it. But then when we went up there, we had to go back to our homes, which had burnt, as well as, I mean, it was It was pretty much the beginning of the end. So we tried to. It burnt our shops with had all of our equipment in it, and we didn't have contents insurance. So I mean, you know, it's a story of negativity that doesn't really. I don't need to go down that road, but I think a lot of people were inundated with the huge problems, and as were the insurance companies, right? That
Right.
nobody could keep up with that level of natural disaster. Poor Fort McMurray's having a really hard time because they just went through a flood as well not too long ago. So they've had a tough go, the citizens of that town.
A question I wanted to go back to from Bull Rush in the chat room, and he was asking, how do you fight mental and physical fatigue? And this could be just in general. What have you learned? What are strategies you use? Not necessarily on the crab boat, but just you've had so much experience in your life with high adrenaline activities, pushing yourself. How do you do? This is kind of like everybody wants to know. Like, how do you do it? What are your suggestions for fighting mental fatigue? What worked for you? What might work for others? Physical fatigue. You're like, I ate 7 bananas a day. All right, I'm going to do that. Whatever it was, but yeah, if you could, touch base on that, because it's a really good question. And I'm interested. I'm like, how the hell did you keep doing this? And throughout everything, what are your strategies? What worked for you? What might work for other people?
It's for me, it might not be what works for everybody, but I know in Fort McMurray, I had one sober guy on my crew named Vernon. God bless Vernon, a Jamaican guy, and he didn't drink, and so all of us would have to get because we'd get drug tested out at the plants, and I'd get a lot of work. So I guess the answer to your question is we used a lot of drugs.
Okay. Yeah. No. Tell me about that. I mean, let's. Whatever you feel comfortable with, but yeah.
I mean, it's. I work with addicts, and it's a tough area to. It's certainly not. Doesn't coincide with starting a business, so this is more of a personal side of my life. But yeah, I think unfortunately in the realm of all sorts of construction where trades are put to the test in severe conditions, I think that you're going to see some form of endurance. I mean, other than natural. I mean, now that I'm a recovered addict, I don't line up those 10,000 footers back to back, for example.
Okay.
That's like, I guess as a business manager now that runs, I don't load myself. I mean, I've had to manage my life differently so that my personal well-being's first and foremost. That supersedes money. But I guess when you're running those cycles of, hey, I can make $1 million in 4 or 5 months.
Yep.
You make those decisions to maybe choose drugs. And I say that with having seen a lot of people do that, aside from myself, and seen it, I think it's, I mean, I don't think the discussion needs to go down that road, but I definitely see that there's guys who are tenacious, or employees, male or female, they feel that obligation to their employer. And they're also, when push comes to shove, if you want that paycheck and it's minus 30 and you got to keep going, you're going to find something to put in your body.
Right. And you were sharing with me, when we're talking about, say that it is something, $1 million that could be made in 4, 5, 6 months. To get to that $1 million, there might be tens of thousands of dollars of drugs, that are consumed in order to get to that and get to that goal, which is, probably not uncommon across many high stress, high deadline, industries. Share also, you talked about the impact of working in high adrenaline jobs, right? The impact this had on your body, and I guess the impact on your adrenal glands. When you found out, hey, here's a situation, with your adrenal glands that they've changed because of the lifestyle you've led, and what that means, and then I guess how you manage that right now. Because when we're young, I think we believe we can do things perpetually, and then when we get older, we realize, oh, some of those things that we did when we were younger have some consequences now. But so you worked with, was it a homeopath, or can you tell us that story?
Yeah. So I was in Dubai doing some work, and I was ill, and I'd been ill for quite, for about systematically getting ill, like not super ill, but I was ill, and I didn't know why. So I'd gone, no real results. I'd gone to this naturopath who was very thorough. He's a University of Victoria doc. And he didn't take him long to determine from some other things that my adrenaline glands were completely depleted. And that was the first time that I'd heard that.
Right.
I was like 27 or something. And he said, yeah, like, what do you do? What's your history? Right. I mean, obviously he's got you don't fill out in your questionnaire all the things you've done in your life. Right.
Right.
So he was interviewing me, and he says, holy shit. Like, yeah, he says, like, you have nothing in there. Like, and that was unbeknownst to me that, going from the sports or whatever, the edge riding sports into, and I mean, and we still, having kids, we don't edge ride as much, but we still were, even when we had babies, we were still edge riding our snowmobiles. And I have friends that are still absolutely insane on their toys. But
right.
I guess that adrenaline that everybody's chasing, right? I didn't know that your body could get depleted of that.
Right.
I know that there's a dependency thing there with drugs and alcohol. So I don't know how all that plays a part, but it was fascinating to me to find out that your body can actually become completely depleted. Yeah.
I had done some research in that and studied, with some other researchers, adrenaline. And it's interesting too, because your body can just also reset at a higher, what it's called a higher cortisol level. So basically you just have a higher adrenaline in your body all the time when you're doing these jobs. It never resets, like it's always just high. And there are really negative effects of that, like, it can thin out your blood vessels and stuff like that. So it's good. Yeah. That, that's not the state that you're in anymore. But it was really weird though, because it would reset in people to this high level, and it would take months or years to come back down. So I'm thinking too, like, think of the crab boat, when you're talking about crab boating, maybe, some of the deadlines on some of the huge concrete, once that would be passed, I'm guessing your adrenaline levels stayed high for quite a while. But you're right. Actually, it is something that, it does deplete. It just doesn't react after a while. It kind of shuts off. If that's this perpetual. So what do they tell you? What do they say? Here's what to do to feel better, to restore this.
He gave me he had to change my diet, and he gave me a big long list of things to do lifestyle wise, and as well as some very specific things to try to get those adrenal glands replenished. But back to, I will say one thing about when you asked about the tenacity of the mindsets of all these different types of dudes, or people that I worked with, whether it's in crabbing or concrete, all the guys who tough it out, who become your comrades, they all have the same mindset. They're all crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't mean they're not intelligent, but they have something in them that's called, it's dig. It's deep, that I think, I don't know whether it comes from, I don't like, it's a dig that I think you either have or you don't.
Right.
And the people that don't have it don't make it. And quite often the guys that have it, they're fascinating. They give you the shirt off their back, but they probably have some personal problems. Yeah. I don't know why, but it takes a certain type, and maybe I'm entirely wrong on this. This is just my personal opinion. So I'm not a degree, but what I've seen, the guys who stick and stay in those types of jobs, they're the type of guys you'd want behind you in a fist fight, but they're also unpredictable in certain scenarios.
Wow.
Right.
So we have a question from Bacon. He was asking, as far as racial makeup on the cruise, any people of color on the boats?
Lots.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Bacon
Guys
answered your
from
question.
Paraguay, guys from all over the United States, with a variety of ethnicities, all common in the United States. So I don't have any one specific one, but I mean, my roommate was a African American gentleman who was super tough, and he actually went on to be my first trip. He was just not really anybody on the boat, and when I went back my second trip, he was a deck boss. So he climbed the ladder and kicked butt, and yeah. But I did see a few guys, like even Rex there. Sorry, Rex, if you're listening, you're probably not, but the bigger guys, and no disrespect to them, because they could also lift 200 pounds easily, where I couldn't. They tend to get more injuries because of the quickness of it's something about this that my deck bosses, they all seem to be the same size. Roy Jr. style, 170 pounds, really lightweight, and they were able to instinctively move more so than there was a lot of
That's fascinating.
Ripped coats, where stuff would happen and oh, look at this, and it ripped right through their gear, but it wouldn't get them. And whereas another guy would get his leg squished because he was that extra 40 pounds and he just didn't get that leg out. So
yeah,
lots and lots of whoa, did you see that? And I mean, when I look back at that, I'm complacent and I think, oh, I made it. But I think I made it because I was just happened to luck out.
So you mentioned earlier, did I get this wrong, that you gained weight while you were on the boat, or did you lose weight while you were on the boat physically?
Well, you gain it because they feed you so well. So you're actually MLR Cook was on the show, The Deadliest Catch. He went on to cook for other boats.
Okay.
Emil, his name was Emil, which was funny. But
that is funny.
Yeah, Emil, make me meal. But he would tell me that you can't have any more pancakes. I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" It'd be 3 a.m. and I'd just woken up, and then I'd have to go tell the first mate. The first mate would come down and be like, "You make this kid as many fucking pancakes as he wants."
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And so that's the sort of, and then you'd only have 20 minutes to eat in between your 16 hours. So you'd work for 8 hours, you'd eat for 20 minutes, you go back at it for 8. So you're shoveling your food in.
Right. It's still amazing to me that you put on weight, because the job is so strenuous. So obviously you must have really had high, caloric intake, whatever. So what, you're eating pancakes? What, Spam, Fruit Loops?
Oh, they
Skittles.
Everything that you could think of, they had for food. Well, that's not entirely true. Towards the end of every trip, it got scarce.
Right.
Not real scarce, but scarce-ish. But you had your Mexican night, which I loved. Food, I love food. So food, especially being a recovered addict, food's my it's all I have left.
Sure.
Just kidding. Sorry. But yeah, no. So yeah, the food was always really good. I mean, I remember at Thanksgiving though, which was kind of funny. He didn't everything kind of. He's got these systems for cooking because the boat's moving so much.
Yeah.
And I went in the galley and he was sleeping and the turkey was whipping across.
Oh yeah, get your turkey under control.
Yeah. So he got in trouble and he had to make a whole other turkey and we missed Thanksgiving dinner. So
that is an awesome story.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, so Rob, we have a question from Sir Brian Bowden from the Bronx, New York City, and he's asking, how do you deal with it mentally after the job is done? So, yeah, I mean, how do you unplug? How do you come home? Be a dad to your kids, and not take this stuff around with you 24/7.
Well, I kind of got in the habit of not talking about it.
Okay.
Because of the story, once in a while you cross a guy who was a crabber, or he'd been to Dutch, or he'd been, fishing in Alaska, and you could share stories, but you kind of, I don't ever want to compare myself with anybody who's been to war, because I certainly couldn't compare to that. But I can say that after coming home and trying to maybe not brag about it, or when I was younger, try to be like, oh, this is, nobody really believes you, or they there's no way that you could have done that, or so I just turned it off. I didn't really talk about it that much, because
Okay.
there's no point. I mean,
And I think you indicated too, like everybody kind of went their own way because they were from all over the place. So you're talking about Rex and some people who, I mean, you really didn't stay in contact with, because that's not how it was. These people weren't coming back to your hometown, or,
well,
things. So when it dissolved, it dissolved.
I stayed. I actually just got a message from a guy about a month ago looking for one of my crab, like all four. I know that one of my deck bosses is alive, but I think 3 of them have passed, and they were young dudes. I sure hope they haven't, but when I searched for them on Facebook, and then their military, one of them was in the military, their military. I mean, how do you, I probably was a bit naive going out there and doing that job, and I'm pretty lucky that I'm alive. Is probably, and it's not something that I glorify, but when I really analyze it, I go, maybe I was a bit naive. Maybe there was some higher power. Like it was a dangerous job, and I made a rash decision, and I lucked out coming back. But I mean, it's not a fun memory, I guess, but it's still kind of cool, if you will. Like, I don't know.
So we've got, I'm going to pull it up right here. And share screen. All right. So this is from 3 days ago. This is, looks like a Malon Reyes, a deckhand on a deadliest catch. So he died. He was 38 years old. Didn't die on the boat, but it was a heart attack. So, leaves behind a wife and 4 children. But, that's a, I guess if you follow through on the people who serve as deckhands and on these boats, I wonder if there is, as you said, the lifespan comes down because you've just done more damage to your body. And I don't know more beyond this, but I mean, there are several articles like this, just because the show's been popular. They'll bring in people. Yeah, he had here it's telling where he had a torn Achilles heel while he was crabbing, and he could never kind of get back to it after that. So, hey, I'm going to ask you a question from John Steele. John Steele is a friend of the show. Actually was on episode 88, which is Escape from Seattle, recorded more than a year ago, not with the current Seattle events, but he's just asking, do you miss the rush? Do you miss the rush?
I do.
Okay. Yeah, I thought so. I would.
And there's been a few times where I can get hyped back up around August, and I've called the boat, which doesn't take long and that was more so when I was in my drinking days. I would get excited and think I wanted to go back out there, and then it didn't take long if I sobered up to realize, no, I don't want to do that. Right. And I mean, my level of adrenaline now is snowmobiling. So, I mean, I still ride my skateboard very cautiously. Like my kids I basically go with them. But for my level of adrenaline that I get now, I would say it's riding a snowmobile. And that's also done cautiously and with route finding and proper gear. But yeah, I mean, being somebody who had to go through, I mean, we ended up going into the rehab program. So I did get educated on addiction and on dopamine, and you learn a lot. And so you actually learn why you're chasing that big jump, or why you're like, and you learn something about yourself as to like, no, like that's something in my brain chasing that adrenaline. Right. So I mean, this is just my personal experience. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody, but yeah, you have to manage the desire for risk taking and gauge that risk taking accordingly. Right. So.
Right. Yeah. Cause you're right. I mean, risk taking is part of life, but as you also shared, your perception is people that would do, for example, crab boating, they're predisposed. They're seeking a higher level of engagement, whether it be a strenuous job, something really unpredictable. And um, so we have excellent questions from the chat. So thank you guys so much in the chat. I mean, I want to bring these forward to you. So Rob, a question again from Bacon Maldito. He's asking, did you carry forward the same type of diet once you got out of crabbing? And he's indicating he's seen that in military veterans over high intensity jobs, that when they get out of the military, they continue at, these types of diets. And I'm assuming that and put on a lot of weight. But so did you carry that diet over once you got out of crabbing?
No, I didn't. For some reason, my body burns a lot of calories. I don't know why, but I have a hard time keeping weight on without really packing back the food and maybe not having physical exercise. As soon as my body goes into physical exercise, I don't keep that weight. Okay. So I didn't. But I know my wife and my mom, when I came back, they didn't. I had a big beard and like all guys grow up there, and they didn't recognize me when I got home. My son didn't recognize me either. So
because you said you put on weight. Actually, that's why they didn't recognize you.
It was muscle.
Okay.
So I'd put on. I hadn't really gained any overweight. It was all in my upper body, my chest. I was a bait boy before I was a deckhand. So I was the guy jumping in the traps. And that's a shitty job.
When was this photo taken?
When or where?
Well, I guess when was this, like,
that's
early on?
That's my first trip. Yeah. So
okay.
I would have been, that was, I was a young man then.
Wow. And you said then the first thing was like you had to bait the traps?
Yeah. So as a bait boy, that's one notch up from a processor. If you get that great position, is when you're lawn lining. So right there, we were lawn lining. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it's a pretty cool system. There's 1,000 hooks per mile. You got a 10 and 11 miles of gear, and you set that gear with an automatic baiter, and then what's left when you haul is all these awesome fish that come up. And if you're on them, you're gaffing and moving pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah. So your physical, when you're working out there, you're probably burning 7,000 calories a day.
I was going to say, I mean, yeah, that's because, like Michael Phelps training for, the Olympics or something, I think, 8,000 calories a day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's where it just is astounding to me that you were putting on weight, even though it's muscle, right? That you're still having a mass gain of
so
weight.
They feed you a lot of too. Like what you'll do is, so I guess I should back up the truck. When you're a bait boy for a long line, your whole sole purpose is just hauling bait from the hold up to. So you're hauling 100 pounds back, like literally for 16 hours, you're hauling 100 pounds in your arms when you're a bait boy long lining. So you're, and then they bake a lot. Like I would take all the baking after breakfast. So I'd have my big breakfast between 3 and 3. By 4 o'clock, I was ready to go, 4 a.m. And my pockets would be filled with everything I could have, because by 10 a.m., so you wouldn't get lunch till noon. By 10 a.m., your stomach was severely empty. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, you're stealing all the food. You're going through a ton, and then very similar to concrete finishing too. I'll say that you're burning the same amount of calories when you're doing those big pours.
So I know I'm going to get these questions from the side, but so then what would you recommend? Like if you're going to be burning that many calories, what would you recommend that people eat?
We take salt pills. All depends on the time of year, as you know, but we take religiously. There's these really good marathon packets.
I got some of these salt pills. They're from Japan, actually. Take them when I bike marathon.
So good.
Yeah.
Anybody who says, well, I'm sure, yeah, you anybody who's pushing the limits with hydration and I only really find I get in trouble. When I say trouble, like towards the end of summer with tendonitis and dehydration and repetitive malnutrition. And that's when I start taking those marathon packets and really diving into the bottom of the tank.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. You're like, I'm taking beef jerky.
Well, I mean, like, I'll give an example. Like I went to my doctor and I said, okay, give me some T3s to take with me. And he gave me 250 T3s, which are just Tylenol with codeine, but they were gone in the first week.
Holy smokes.
Like, you're taking whatever you can to keep going, right? So,
wow.
like, and you give them out to all your buddies because everybody's sore, and then everybody goes on to what everybody else has. I mean, it's, and I need to reiterate that I'm not speaking on behalf of every boat and every crew, but from what I've seen with those dynamic groups of athletic dudes that have no coach or no real, they haven't set a good path for their health prior to taking on that work, is they revert to any form of malnutrition that gives them that extra bit of energy.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense.
Yes.
So let me kind of move us toward our last trade. This has been fascinating. I really appreciate it. So much interaction in the chat. I'm going to have Rob back on the show, and we're going to focus on his company, Rooftop Life Raft. And this show gives you an idea about Rob, and I think really frames it well for why you're qualified, to design these rooftop life raft, systems, which people can be rescued during sudden flooding. But so tell me, I'm going to find some images, I'll bring them up. But when did you get into deciding, hey, I'm going to, create this company where we're going to have these life raft systems, these survival systems, which will deploy? I think you're sharing with me in the Netherlands, the required systems. We know that we've had hurricanes, of course, in the U.S. These flooding in the southern states. How did you get into that? How did you decide this is what you wanted to do? And tell me about that process. I'm going to be, and as you see some of the images come up, feel free to comment on them.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for asking about that. Rooftop Life Rafts is a project that we're all proud of, and it's myself and 6 of my friends. And well, it started out as 6 of us total, but what happened is we were solving a problem. Year after year, I'd been through a minor flood, so not a catastrophic one where any life was lost, thank God, but enough to have an eye opener. And so when I moved my family, we were renting, and we moved into a home, and we had the option of the second or the first floor. We chose the second floor, and I put a raft in the closet because we were near a flood dike. And so that was the beginning of Rooftop Life Rafts some years ago. And then we started to see flood footage annually of people being stuck on their roofs. And everybody, all these flood organizations, not naming any, they say, okay, get on your roof and call 911. Well,
right.
The simple numbers that we all know, Hurricane Harvey was 6 million people affected, and between Friday and Monday that weekend, there was 75,000 phone calls to 911, and 21,000 people were on their roofs waiting to be rescued. Right. And that's one example. So my friends and I had, we'd done what every entrepreneur does, is thought to ourselves, well, this product must exist. And that was a couple of years ago, and it didn't. So we researched long and hard, and then we got it patented, which was very difficult to do, I think. I wouldn't, no disrespect to the USPTO, they've been fabulous, but it was definitely challenging as an entrepreneur to get this far. And so here we are with we've just merged with a firm that's given us some horsepower to get us to a launching phase, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've got this image up so people can conceptualize. So tell me what's in that image.
So that's deployed into open water there. That's our 4-man Ranger, which is it provides a family of 4 an opportunity to get to safety in the event of a flash flood, tsunami, or any sort of rising water scenario. And the unit, really, in essence, you push a button and you're off to the races with all sorts of survival goodies in there. We custom make them ourselves, so we're able to pack high quality gear in there. So customers are able to choose from a variety of good quality gear that they can put in there, as well as they can increase the size of the raft right up to a 10-person. So that's
How about,
cool.
like, how about the Netherlands? Like, this is this is required in the Netherlands that they have a system like this, right?
Well, they've mandated that it's municipal law to have marine craft in your yard.
Okay.
So that's where they're headed, in the sense that, I mean, I don't have any of my units in the Netherlands, but I would say that, I mean, this invention isn't really to make money. And I've had people say, "Oh, call me when you're on your yacht," and that's not what it's for. It's to save lives. And the frustrating thing, and I shouldn't say frustrating, but the ambitious part is when you watch the news and you see people really stuck, and you're like, I know how to get you guys off there. And so that's what this is designed to do. As well as we've been blessed to synergize with some larger firms that specialize in saving lives, that have paved the way themselves, and they've synergized with us. So we've reached out with some bigger companies, and it's growing, it's working well, and I look forward to the future to see what we can do to help people, because that's really what it's about, is helping.
So I just put a video up. So basically, just tell us what's happening here in this video, Rob.
So that unit there, you mount to the exterior of your building, or any exterior, or you can mount it outside your patio or outside a window. And you would, just like you would plan with your family to have an evacuation plan for a fire, you would also have an evacuation plan for your flood, or flash floods or tsunamis. And that's where you'd talk about where you'd logically put it on your home. And this one here that you see, believe it or not, it's not that easy to find somebody to let you mount one on their home.
Okay.
Not to mention, you can't flood a yard. So that simulation there was done into open water for us in a field test. And so far we're gaining some good traction with it.
So, and I've been very impressed. There's so many things, like you shared the owner's manual, kind of the instruction guide, which is extremely well written. And what I mean by that is it's written for people to both interact with before a disaster, but even like during, when they're stressed out or chaotic times, they can pull the information out, the pictures, the descriptions. And there's this whole premise too. I shared it with you because it instantly rang a bell with me. This is designed in this process called cognitive offloading. And basically what cognitive offloading, in a way that most of us are familiar with it, if you go into a place and there's an AED device in a hallways, right? So somebody has a heart attack and you grab the AED. The modern AED, once you open it up, it tells you what to do. It verbally will say, take out, these pads, put them on this spot, watch for the green light, listen for this. And so cognitive offloading means you build a lot of the knowledge into the equipment, so you don't have to figure it out in the moment. You don't have to sit up there and figure, I have to pull this lever, then I have to put this in, then I have to do this and this and this. So you've already taken this like extremely intelligent cognitive offloading approach right from the start with your product, and you're making it better with every revision that you do. And I look at that and I marvel, because I think that's where it comes out from your ingenuity. Like you said, when I was on the crab boat, I getting the ski goggles made sense, right? Because of whatever. So there's so many things like you just saw that you incorporate it. And I really like that. I respect that. I respect the work that you do, that approach is there, because a lot of people never get there. It's called universal design too. They don't get there. I mean, so you just have a really good grasp on how to put this together, realizing that people need to interface with this at the hour that is the absolute worst in their life, right? When things are just going to hell. It's like everything's gone. The story of, I've lost all of this stuff. There might be, more. And the last thing on their mind is trying to figure out how to operate this thing. You've taken that away. They just need to get to it. And then, it easily deploys and it reliably deploys, gets them into a safer situation. So just my thought. I'm not, I'm not paid to do this or anything like that. It's just, it's a very high respect. And the more I've done this, I just recognize this in designing. I've shared that with you. So I think it's really cool.
Well, I want to give you some kudos because we got the cognitive offloading directly from you with your, it made so much sense. And our team hadn't, just a bit of a background about our team. We're all outdoor athletes of a variety and do know quite a bit about outdoor backcountry, but none of us are flood specialists. I'll say that. We've become flood specialists over the years, and still look to guys who really know their stuff. But there's some cool things happening with our product. I can't quite quote exactly the companies, but I can say we've aligned ourselves with some search and rescue firms to allow people, customers who do get in that, and like God forbid anybody's in this circumstance, but in the event that they are, we've incorporated some really good technology to allow them to be found efficiently. And
okay,
that technology took some thinking and some collaboration, and that's what we're proud of the most is improving the efficiency of search and rescue in conjunction with giving people an option. I mean, I truly look at this and if we look at what's going on in China, I mean, I don't sleep much, so I'm up at 4:30 every day. That sounds silly, but I am. So I spent a lot of time doing research, and not all of it's, I really got to dive into what's real, but there's a lot of problems going on with rising waters. As we all know, there's a culmination of events, all happening. And China, there's really big water stuff going on. And I think what we need to do is implement the relationship of urban infrastructure more so with Mother Nature. I mean, and that's what Tesla's doing, and all these other. I mean, I'm not comparing rooftop life raft to Tesla by any means, but certainly trying to say that I think there's problems that are yet to be solved. Like, I would hope that this product one day would be as common as a smoke detector, and I'm not trying to pitch that. I really truly mean that. It's common sense to me that we should have these people when it's not uncommon for us with the tectonic plates moving. Don't get me going. I'm geeking out, but yeah, there's a lot of reasons to have this device. And I know I feel safe having one. I mean, I keep a raft in my truck.
Okay.
That's where I'm at, because I know that I live on the West Coast, and I know that, I'm on the San Andreas Fault. Like, maybe I'm jaded, pardon me, because I watch a lot of flood footage. I know the possibilities when it happens. You don't have very long. The sirens go off.
Right.
One of my business partners who lives on the west coast of Ucluelet, of Vancouver Island, which he is on the open Pacific, he has woken up to the tsunami bells going off.
Oh God.
So it's real. And we want to be prepared.
So we have a question. So Bacon is asking, are these Lahar rated? And Lahar is basically kind of like a mudslide equivalent, right? If I'm interpreting that right, like kind of a mud water situation.
That's a great question. We aligned ourselves with a world-renowned manufacturer, Zodiac, who was blessed to give us a lot of advice and consulting on the type of products to use. And so our rafts are polyurethane, and they will withstand a lot of impact, but you know, at the end of the day, they are rafts. So you know, I don't know if I have a definitive answer for you on that.
Yeah, I didn't even know what that term was. I had to look it up. So
well, like I guess I should reiterate. I know that our rafts are Coast Guard approved, and I mean, I again need to reiterate, I'm not a specialist in all things, but I know that I made sure when we designed this thing that by getting the Coast Guard's approval for our marine craft, so that the same technology that is put on survival rescue craft, we implemented in for our systems. So
right.
If that helps answer your question.
Right. No, yeah, I appreciate that you took that, question, because I think it was like, water, mud from a volcanic eruption. Because where you're at, I mean, like in that Seattle area, right? The was it Mount St. Helens was close to, well, in Washington State and things like that. If there were flows that had mud and volcanic ash in, would the boat be okay and the raft be okay?
I honestly, Doc, I mean, I've been watching some of those landslides. You know what? I just I still think there's a lot of evolution to be had in the technology and implementation of. I mean, I got this gentleman who's he specializes in just search and rescue. He's a private consultant for the military. And he's been talking to us, and he's going, there's so much science behind how water comes into a community and where the eddies are created. And so and Japan, they're a perfect example of studying water moving around urban structures fast, that we see it in rivers. We see it in rivers that are meandering, that all of a sudden cut straight paths. And there's predictable paths, but I have to constantly say there's so much I don't know. I know that my family doesn't want to be stuck on the roof, and as simply as that's how this came to be. And then all 6 of our teammates said, okay, well, all of us have kids. What can we do to make this thing more comfortable and more user friendly? So it's I'm sure that it's 10 years from now, I would be proud, and I would hope to say that it's mind-blowingly different from how it is now.
Oh yeah, it was just I'm amazed. I mean, these are really, you can tell how much people are invested in this discussion by the type of questions that are coming in. And Bacon had shared, just personally, he had lived in a Lahar zone, and he was glad after he moved, because what happens when he's living there, because right, I mean, people aren't thinking about this. I had Katie Pashon on as a guest on a show a couple of years ago. She worked with Cajun Navy Relief, talked about a town in, I don't know, might have been, Texas, Louisiana, during Hurricane Harvey. And what happened is, so Cajun Navy Relief is a nonprofit. They would come in and help rescue people out of situations where there'd be rapid flooding. But she said this one community, I don't know, 10 or 15,000 people, the fire department had one boat and rising water. So a lot of people are suddenly isolated. They haven't planned ahead. They don't have a rooftop life raft, system or any type of boat. And, so she's getting called. They're dispatching boats rapidly to get in there and to get people off of roofs. But, again, that's a situation where not everybody makes it out alive. And I want to get at this too. You're telling me, was it Houston, Texas? You had recently sold some of the life rafts, and you drove them down there and had them all packed in and got them down. Was it Houston?
We've got an offer going through right now that we have not made a deal, but we've been working closely on making a deal in Houston, and I will let you know when that deal goes through. But it's exciting,
Yeah.
And it is for a housing development that is susceptible to flooding. I think you know that what's going to be cool about this product is your ability to customize it. So, you know, like the one that I have in my truck that's on my, like the one that I custom made has waterproof binoculars, and it has a life straw in it. Life straws
Okay.
are
Yep.
reputable trademarked item. So, you know, quite easily, because we're not a big entity, you can get a hold of us, shoot us an email. Currently, the only people that own these things are my family. So we have, like I said, teamed up with a large venture capitalist recently who's going to be pretty close to getting us launched, I'd say within 6 months. But in the meantime, if anybody out there wants one, they'd have to get a hold of me personally.
Okay. And I think you can post this too, or you can give it to me in private chat. But if they did a search and I just put it in rooftop life raft plus Vancouver, it'll come up with the website. I'm going to get the website up here in a little bit too. Whoa, wait.
Yeah, sure. We are, I mean, we've had, like I said, it's, for me, it's not about, hey, let's sell 100 of them, let's sell 200. Like, there's so much flooding going on in places that truly, like, I don't know the ratios, so what they look like, but the ratios are, I'm hoping to, for every 100 units I sell, get 10 out to places that can't afford them, or, you know, communities where there's homes of folks that can't afford them, that need them. And I mean, they don't break the bank, and I don't really have a number that I can put to them because each one's made custom. But I can say that, yeah, I just, right now, I'm just excited to see what's yet to come, and I believe we're solving a problem. And I hope to see somebody say, hey, we want one of those, and that's where we'll go with it.
Boy, that is terrific. I mean, I admire that, and as you indicated, you know, the need is there. The solution, you know, you're part of putting that together, evolving a product. The custom, being able to customize it out for people too, I think is a huge, you know, plus. Because once things get really large and mass produced, you lose that ability to customize and get down to the unit of, this really would work better for you here versus like here, but there's just one, you know, item to pick from. So,
yeah,
well, I mean,
sorry to interrupt you, Doc. If you just made me think of something. I mean, if you want your favorite waterproof, you know, novel, we can put that in there. If your Bible, if
yeah,
you know, a flask, we could probably slide a flask in there, as long as it's empty. I mean, so that's kind of the cool thing about us is that if you say, hey, I've got 7 people, and I've got a dog that I really care about, and this is the size of the dog, we can work with you on making sure that dog has an evacuation plan, or animal, excuse me, as well.
oh yeah, that is really cool. And you know, another part of, you know, the psychology behind that is it's something, you know, kind of goes from what's called a crowd in theory. But if people have a couple of comfort items with them during a time of chaos, a time of rescue, you know, this is, you know, similar to law enforcement, you know, having a stuffed animal in the trunk of a car. So there's a scene of an accident and there's a 7-year-old girl, you know, they'll give this, you know, to her. But you know, these types of things, thinking ahead, if people have a few of those things that genuinely are going to bring comfort to them during a chaos situation, they might have a functional aspect too, but that is again huge in keeping people calm and giving people a sense of control over themselves and their environment. And you know, again, so you're thinking along a line that's really down the road. People don't get into crowd in theory and considerations in chaos engineering. Often they just kind of just don't even get there. But it's really, again, further down the road thinking. It's a high level of knowing. Yeah, we know that this is a chaotic situation. We want to provide people with a few things that they've picked out ahead of time that they can customize, which are going to make them feel better while they're, you know, in the raft awaiting transport to, whatever it is, or the rescue team comes to get them. So there's so many things. And again, we'll get into this during the show, but there are these things that I pick up on that I'm like, oh, like you thought about this, and just most people don't. Like 98% of the people just don't think about these things, but yet they're very impactful, right? The cognitive offloading, the way that you've designed these things, that you're getting qualitative input from people, that you're customizing. There's just so many things like to just come together. And I'm like, this is just really good. Like, let's just even take the product out of it. Rob, if we just looked at how you did this, like you just have done it in a path which other people should follow. And I think maybe, as you talked about in the show, the things that you've done earlier in life, and maybe the other teammates, that you're working with now, the other people, maybe their experiences all come together to start forming some of that. Because I don't think I'd see it otherwise. Because a lot of people jump into things and they don't have that previous experience and kind of pull that tacit knowledge that really makes an awesome, cool product that people can interface with. And I'm going to break it down at some point, but again, I work with so many different people, and I just observe so many different things that what you've done just stands out in just so many levels. So I'm really. And I'll just continue to give the kudos to it, because those kudos should be given when someone genuinely wants to create something that is going to lead to a safer environment, and then does it in a way that is really intelligent, really has intelligent design to it. It's cool.
Thank you. That means so much to me. And I just, without getting passionate about it, it means a lot to me to have a guy with your credentials recognize that. And I've been telling my team, my father, I'm not sure if you got an email from him or not, but he's been a big supporter of this. Travis is his name. He's 16. He's going to get mad at me if he's listening. 67, turning 68. And he won't care about that. That's besides the point. My point is he's a very intelligent man and follows you, and said, that doctor, I thank you very much for being such a supporter of us and giving your input willingly. And we take it, and I take it back to my team, even though you haven't met them, and we're all very thankful.
Good. Hey, well, I appreciate that. And what I'm going to do is do a summary of what we just talked about, and then how people can get a hold of you, and then we'll let all the good folks here in the chat, start to turn in for the night, depending upon where they're at. If they're over in Germany, I think they're just getting up in the morning. But so, hey, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to the Safety Doc podcast, and a shout out to our guest, Rob Travis Cheney. We spent a lot of time talking about his experiences as an Alaskan crab boater, and 122-day stint, just this crazy stuff, right? I mean, these stories you just don't hear about, and then talking about being a pro snowboarder, working in concrete business, and then talking now about survival life raft systems. Just a really fascinating discussion, and too, it's one of those discussions. You're right. I mean, when we talk about adrenaline and what it's like to live a life, and maybe some of the consequences, how you have to rebalance back from that. But yeah, there's been so much terrific feedback from here. Hey, Joe Dolio from our friend over in Michigan, Joe, where they have a lot of water, Lake Michigan. So Joe, so it's a good thing. Stay safe, man. Here in Wisconsin, I got Lake Superior right above me too. If that thing drains out, I'm in big trouble. But hey, Bacon Maldito said, I am going to throw you on my list of talking about you, awesome. Rob, on my sponsors along with Doc. So Bacon has a very popular show, and you can, I think it's the goddamn bacon.com, Bacon Maldito. But yeah, Bacon. So that's really a cool thing. So thanks for
sure. Thank you.
Doing that. And Bacon, when you talk about survival, so Bacon very much is from a survival mindset, and actually was able to get inside of the temporary autonomous zone in Seattle because of the work that he does. he was given access inside and outside of that zone, and he was able to share some experiences and share some photos. But I know everything that you've talked about is very aligned to a lot of the things that Bacon does. We have a number of folks too. I mean, between Joe and Bacon, who have extensive martial arts experience. And again, I think this all kind of blends into a global survival mindset. So I know it's late, but hey, if you have a friend, tell them about this book. School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America. It's really a book about chaos management. First chapter, how thinking about a bagel can get you through the worst day of your life. Interesting. Right now, I'm working with a publisher. Yesterday, it was weird. Sunday, we were talking about 2 books, and today it went back to consolidating 2 books into 1 book. But I don't know where it will be tomorrow. But I have another book coming out, The Velocity of Information, and possibly a 3rd book, unless that gets rolled into the 2nd book. But so everybody, thank you so much. Hit that subscribe. If you haven't already, hit the thumbs up on the show. I appreciate that. And looking, ahead again, we are going to have Rob back on the show, and we're going to really focus in on what it's like to go from scratch and to build these systems, to test, these systems. Kind of go through the areas that just case study some rapid developments of, hey, oh my God, like this massive area that they didn't think was going to flooded. Here were the consequences. Here's what could have been different if you would have had for example, a life raft, different survival equipment with you. Things we just, as you like, you had the life or the straw, right, where you can purify water by drinking through a straw. Just things people don't think about until it's after the fact, and it's like, well, I don't, what do I do now? So again, getting people to think ahead. So how can people contact you, learn more about your work?
Oh, yeah, they can hit me up just by emailing rooftopliferafts@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and I respond immediately usually because lately I got a newborn at home, so I'm probably averaging 4 hours of sleep a night. So yeah, I'm always open to talk to anybody about survival or anything intriguing, in fact. So yeah, reach out, and thanks for having me.
Okay. Hey, I appreciate it. Well, take care, Rob, and we will look forward to having you back on the show. So I really appreciate it. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Doc. Cheers.